My name is Adeline Whitfield. I'm 31. And a retired Supreme Court justice was standing at my uncle's anniversary party in Kelowna, holding a champagne flute, when he stopped mid-toast and looked directly at me across the room. 60 seconds earlier, he'd been talking about loyalty and what family is supposed to mean. My aunt was beaming. My cousin was leaning into her new husband's shoulder. Then his eyes found mine and the whole room felt the temperature drop. I have to say, he said, voice carrying easily over the string quartet, I wasn't expecting to see you here. Then he asked the question that cracked my whole life open at the seam. What exactly is your relationship to this family? Every glass paused halfway to a mouth. My aunt let out a thin, bright laugh and answered before I could. Oh, that's Adeline. She does something with computers. Very behind the scenes. He didn't look at her. To understand why a retired Supreme Court justice would ask that question, you have to understand what I started calling the photo wall, back when I was 9, in my aunt and uncle's front hallway in Kelowna. There were 9 frames on that wall, 7 of my cousin Priya. Soccer trophies, her debut at the Okanagan Youth Orchestra, her braces-off smile, her acceptance letter to UBC held up like a winning lottery ticket. One photo of me, a school picture tucked behind a ceramic loon my uncle had bought on a trip to Tofino. You had to crouch down and tilt your head to actually see my face in it. I climbed onto a kitchen chair when I was 9 and moved my photo to the center of the wall. By the next afternoon, it was back behind the loon. I never tried again. Instead, I just kept trying everything else. My parents died in a car accident on the Coquihalla when I was 6, coming back from a ski weekend in Sun Peaks. My Aunt Solange and Uncle Marcel took me in because there wasn't really anyone else, and to their credit, they fed me, clothed me, paid for my hockey camp one summer. But there's a particular kind of love that comes with fine print, and mine had fine print stitched into every birthday card. We're so glad you're part of our family, sweetheart. Even though what? I never quite got them to finish the sentence. Priya was theirs, biologically, and she was warm and easy in a way that made people want to be near her, and none of that was her fault. The fault was in how Solange built an entire identity around making sure everyone in Kelowna knew whose daughter was thriving, and whose niece was just around. Honor roll didn't move my photo forward. Neither did the provincial math competition I placed second in, when Solange left the award ceremony early because Priya had a dress fitting for a debate tournament banquet. She called me from the car. Priya's coach said she has the best closing argument he's seen in 15 years. She said, like that was the news of the night, while I was still holding a plaque with my own name engraved on it. I left for the University of Waterloo at 18, with a partial scholarship and my uncle's handshake still stiff on my palm. My aunt's parting words, delivered in the driveway like a benediction. Don't go thinking this changes anything, Adeline. We still expect you to keep your head down. I studied computer engineering, then specialized in cybersecurity, because there was something deeply satisfying about finding the flaw nobody else could see. By 26, I was working forensic incident response for a firm in Toronto. The kind of work where companies call you at 2 a.m. because someone just realized their entire client database has been sitting open on the dark web for 6 days. My first big case was a credit union in Mississauga that had been breached for almost a year before anyone noticed. I traced the intrusion back through 11 shell accounts to a fraud ring that had already hit 4 other institutions across Ontario. The RCMP got involved. It went to trial. My manager pulled me into his office afterward and said, "That was sharp work, Whitfield." 4 words. I drove home and sat in my car in the parking garage for 10 minutes before I could make myself go inside, because nobody had said anything like that to me in years, and I didn't know what to do with it. I called my aunt that night anyway, because some part of me never stopped trying. She let me get 2 sentences out before asking if I'd heard that Priya made junior partner at her law firm. I had. Everyone had. Solange had sent out an email blast to 40 people in her contact list with a photo of Priya in front of the firm's logo. The thing was, Priya's actual job was perfectly fine. She did employment law, mostly contract disputes, decent but unglamorous work. The problem was never what Priya did. The problem was what my aunt did with it. To hear Solange describe it at her book club, Priya was shaping labor policy across the province. Her Christmas letter that year said Priya was becoming one of the most formidable young litigators in Toronto. Priya herself rolled her eyes about it to me since the one time we were alone together at Thanksgiving once. "She does this to both of us, you know," Priya said quietly, "just in opposite directions." I didn't fully believe her then. I didn't have the room in me to. When I pointed out, gently, once, that I'd actually testified as an expert witness in a federal fraud case, my aunt looked at me with something close to pity and said, "Not everything needs to be a big production, Adeline. I don't have a husband. I don't have kids. I have a 1-bedroom condo near Liberty Village with 3 monitors and a sourdough starter I've kept alive out of pure stubbornness for 2 years. There's no glossy version of incident response work you can put on a Christmas card, so my aunt simply didn't put me on anything. 7 years of LinkedIn posts, community newsletters, family group chats. My name appeared exactly never. Once in a group photo from Priya's call to the bar ceremony, I'm in the frame, but the caption only named everyone except me, and family friends. 10 months before that anniversary party, I'd been brought in as a technical expert on a securities fraud case in Vancouver. A numbered company running an elaborate Ponzi scheme dressed up as a green energy fund, taking retirement savings from seniors across the lower mainland. The trial ran 19 days. I was in that courtroom every single day, walking the judge and jury through transaction logs, wallet addresses, the digital fingerprints that tied the company's principal directly to the missing $31 million. The presiding Justice Aldous Whitcomb, recently retired from the Supreme Court of Canada, but sitting that case as a special appointment, read every page of my report personally and asked sharper questions than the Crown prosecutor did. After the verdict, I ran into him outside the elevator at the Vancouver Law Courts. He stopped, looked at me properly and said, "Ms. Whitfield, your testimony in there was some of the clearest forensic evidence I've seen presented in 30 years on the bench. You should be proud of that." Then the doors opened and he was gone. I stood in that marble hallway for what felt like a full minute before my legs remembered how to work. I wanted to call my aunt. I didn't. The night of the anniversary party, I went to put on the navy dress I'd worn the night I gave a keynote on financial cybercrime at a conference in Ottawa. I hadn't planned to wear it. My hand just went there on its own. Pulling it on, I understood why. It was the one thing in my closet that knew exactly who I actually was, instead of who I'd been told to be. My aunt opened the door before I even knocked, eyes doing a quick, practiced inventory of my outfit, my shoes, my hair. "You're early, she said. "We need to go over a few things." She walked me through the house like a stage manager doing final blocking. My seat card was at the far end of the table, near the kitchen door beside the napkin warmer. "Now, Adeline, tonight is about your uncle and me. Justice Whitcomb and his wife are coming, and his son's family, too. It's a big deal, so just keep things light. No work talk, stay in the background, okay?" I should mention, and I hadn't put this together until I read the guest list 2 days earlier, that Justice Whitcomb was the same justice from the Vancouver trial. My aunt had no idea. To her, he was simply Marcel's old colleague from the Bar Association. Very distinguished. Please don't embarrass us. Guests arrived through the evening. Priya's husband Tobias, his mother Genevieve, and finally Justice Whitcomb and his wife Margaret. My aunt introduced me at the door with her hand resting lightly on my shoulder like she was presenting a piece of furniture. "And this is Adeline, our niece. She does something with computers, very behind the scenes." The justice took my hand, looked at me a beat too long, and said my name slowly, like he was checking it against a file in his memory. Something shifted behind his eyes. My aunt steered him toward the dining room before he could say anything else, but as he turned, he glanced back over his shoulder at me once more. Dinner was my aunt's masterpiece. She poured the wine, passed the dinner rolls, narrated Priya's highlights for Tobias's mother in painstaking detail, and redirected every question that drifted anywhere near me. "Adeline, can you check if there's more ice? Adeline, would you mind grabbing the bread basket from the kitchen?" The third time Margaret tried to ask what I actually did for work, my aunt spoke directly over my first sentence, smooth as anything, and steered the conversation back to Priya's upcoming case. Then Justice Whitcomb tapped his glass with a fork. He stood, buttoned his jacket out of old habit, and started talking about loyalty, about what it means to really know the people sitting at your table. He said something kind about Marcel's decades of friendship. Then he began to walk, slow and deliberate, the way I imagine he used to walk to the bench, around the outer edge of the table, and he stopped at my chair. "I have to say, I wasn't expecting to see you here tonight." My aunt started to answer for me. He didn't look at her. "What exactly is your relationship to this family?" I thought about swallowing it, the way I always had. Smiling, saying, "Oh, I help out with their computers," letting the moment pass like every moment before it had passed. And then I thought about that marble hallway in Vancouver. The sourdough starter on my counter. My name missing from 7 years of family photos. "I'm their niece," I said. "My parents passed away when I was 6 and they raised me. And I'm a cybersecurity forensics analyst. I testified in the Coastal Sustainable Holdings fraud trial you presided over in Vancouver this past spring." My aunt's smile didn't move, but something underneath it cracked. "She does some computer things on the side," she said quickly. "Mostly technical support, really." Justice Whitcomb turned toward her for the first time all evening. His expression wasn't unkind, it was simply unwavering. "Solange, Ms. Whitfield's forensic analysis was the backbone of the Crown's entire case. It's the reason $31 million in stolen pension savings is being returned to 206 seniors across British Columbia. I have not, in 3 decades on the bench, seen a clearer piece of expert testimony." Genevieve set down her fork. "You told us she did tech support," she said to my aunt, voice gone very level and very cold. Not that she helped recover $31 million from a fraud ring. My aunt fumbled with her napkin. I didn't want to make a whole thing out of it. Tobias turned to Priya. Your mom told my mother that Adeline had been struggling, and it was better not to bring up her work. Priya set her wineglass down hard enough that it rang against the plate. That's not true, Priya said. Adeline doesn't struggle. She built a career that puts criminals in prison. She looked at her mother. Why would you tell people that? My aunt's eyes filled. I was protecting this family. Adeline's work, it makes people uncomfortable. I didn't want that following Priya into her marriage. Margaret, who had been quiet the whole night, stood up slowly, the way people do when they've decided something matters more than table manners. What you did, she said, was erase one girl to make a better story out of the other. That isn't a mother protecting her family. That's a woman protecting her own image. My uncle, who hadn't said a single word all evening, finally looked up from his plate. Justice right, Solange. You went too far this time. Justice Whitcomb reached into his jacket and walked to my end of the table, setting a card down beside my water glass. If you ever need a reference, Miss Whitfield, for a fellowship, a board seat, anything, you have my number. Priya looked at Tobias for a long moment, then reached up and unclasped the small gold pendant Genevieve had gifted her at the engagement dinner. Not her ring, but something close enough in meaning that the table went silent. She set it down gently on the tablecloth. I need to understand something, she said. I didn't know my mother told your family those things about my cousin. I need to figure out what else I didn't know. I stood, I folded my napkin and set it beside my plate. I picked up my coat. I turned to my aunt. I love you, I said, but tonight is the last night I make myself smaller so you can feel taller. If you want me at your table again, it'll be as I actually am. She flinched like I'd raised a hand to her. My uncle bowed his head. I walked out without waiting for anyone to call after me. By morning there were 14 messages, my aunt, escalating with each one. You humiliated this family in front of people who matter. I hope your career keeps you warm at night. Priya sent at 11:40 p.m. I don't know how to feel right now, but I am not angry at you. My uncle, at 6:02 a.m., one line. I'm sorry, Adeline, 3 words. More honesty than he'd given me in a decade, and a Vancouver number I didn't recognize. Margaret Whitcomb. My husband hasn't stopped talking about your testimony for months. I'd love to take you for coffee sometime if you're ever open to it. We met 3 weeks later at a cafe near Yorkville. Your aunt told me you'd had a difficult few years, Margaret said, stirring her tea. I believed her, because she said it with such concern in her voice. She's been telling some version of that story since you were in university, hasn't she? It's called the photo wall, I told her. 9 frames in their hallway. 8 of Priya. 1 of me, hidden behind a ceramic loon. Did it ever move? She asked. Once, I said. 6 weeks after the party, Priya called. I knew Mom's version of you wasn't real, she said. I just found it easier to let her keep telling it. She apologized in fragments, the way real apologies tend to come. Not all at once, but in pieces over several conversations. She and Tobias started seeing a counselor together. The pendant went back around her neck 4 months later, no fanfare, just a photo she texted me one evening with no caption at all. I wrote back. I see it, good. My aunt called on a Tuesday afternoon in February. I've been telling people a story about you that wasn't true, she said. I told it so many times I think I started believing parts of it myself. A long pause on the line. I'm sorry for asking you to disappear. I don't fully understand your work, and instead of asking you to explain it to me, I just decided it didn't matter. It wasn't the apology I used to imagine as a kid lying awake in their guest room. It wasn't a grand public reckoning. It was a tired woman on a Tuesday, finally telling the truth, maybe for the first time in 25 years. If you want to try again, I said, it has to be with the real me. I know, she said. I drove up to Kelowna for the first time in over a year, on a Saturday in March, no occasion attached to it at all. Walking into the front hallway, I looked at the wall out of old habit before I could stop myself. My school photo, front teeth slightly too big for my face, was sitting dead center. The ceramic loon had been moved to the side, a little crooked, like the decision had been made fast, and she hadn't quite figured out where else to put it. Over dinner, a pot roast, the same one she'd always made, she asked me, so walk me through how one of your investigations actually works. From the start. A basic question, the kind any aunt might ask at any kitchen table. I answered her step by step. She listened. She asked questions when she didn't understand something instead of changing the subject. She didn't redirect to Priya once. She didn't make any of it smaller than it was. It wasn't a healed family. It wasn't the end of the work it would take to get there. But it was a door that had been bolted shut for 25 years, cracked open about an inch. If you've ever sat at a table where your own family treated you like a footnote in someone else's story, hear me on this. Love that requires you to shrink yourself to fit is not love. It's management. The night that Justice stood in front of me and asked who I was to my own family, I thought telling the truth might cost me my aunt for good. What it actually cost me was the role she'd written for me years before I had any say in it. The quiet niece in the back of the photo. The one who keeps small so someone else can take up all the light. Roles can change, but only once somebody stops reading from the old script. So if you're sitting at a table right now, where the price of belonging is pretending to be less than you are, ask yourself the only question that matters. Who decided that's what belonging was supposed to cost you? Because the first person who needs to know you're done shrinking isn't them. It's you.